Dojo Live. I'm broadcasting from Los Angeles. Welcome to another edition and to the show. Appreciate you having you with us. I'm joined today by my co-host Kim Lantis in Hermosillo, Mexico. Hi, Kim. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you.
And Carlos Ponce in just outside of Mexico City. Welcome to the show again, guys.
Thank you.
Today we're talking with Shannon Hogue. Did I say that right?
You got it.
Excellent. Who is the Global Head of Solutions Engineering at Karat. We're going to look forward to talking with you about something not a lot of people talk about, the technical interview, the process of going through the technical interview specifically for software companies that are hiring software engineers and the challenges around that. But before we go into that, let's get to know you a little bit. Shannon, could you please introduce yourself? Tell us a little about you.
Yeah, sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Shannon Hogue. I'm really honored to be here. Thank you so much. So I am a software engineer by trade. I started writing software way back in the 90s and worked at a few amazing companies. And I came up the chain in engineering and engineering management. Eventually, I realized that, it's my job to make sure that my team is growing, that I advocate for them internally. And I didn't do that very well because I couldn't tie what they were doing to business value. And so I moved into sales engineering at a couple of amazing companies, including New Relic, which I loved, and the rest is history. I just really love speaking with people. I grew up in Chicago, outside of Chicago. I'm a huge Cubs fan. I have a couple of pups and a cat, so I have a little zoo going on in my apartment in San Francisco. But yeah, that's me. Nice to meet all of you.
Yeah,
awesome.
20 years in the Bay Area, and I can still hear your little Chicago accent every now and then. I love it.
Yay for women in STEM. Let's do it. Okay.
Women in
STEM.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
All right, Shannon.
It's actually, I think it's pronounced carrot.
It is
that right?
carrot. I didn't
Carrot.
I didn't want to jump in, but
No, that's okay.
It's definitely carrot. It's all about that
correct
bling. Yeah.
Tell us about it. Tell us about Karat. What does the company do? Tell us.
Yeah, so Karat actually conducts the first round of technical interviews, but we do that with interview engineers that are highly trained. And so I have a really cool job. It's my job at Karat to help companies develop structured interview processes that align to their hiring bars, identify and assess core competencies that they're looking for, and make sure that they get the most predictive signal out of each interview. And we scale through interviews.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what's the topic of conversation today? Who's introducing the show? Kim, you ready?
Sure.
Yes. Let's do it. Let's go right into it.
So we've already talked about this a little bit, but we're going to be talking about interview engineering, fixing the broken technical interviews specifically. The idea is that the problem with most interviews is that they're deemed as nobody's job. So Karat helps make us think about this differently. So please, tell us a bit about why the technical interview is broken and how to fix it.
Yeah, absolutely.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. I think for anyone, and I do say this in my talks, like anyone who's been through a technical interview, and I've done quite a few of those on both sides, right? They kind of suck. Right? They're not always easy for folks. It's a little bit nerve-wracking. You go in, there's a lot of inconsistency. And I think, one thing to keep in mind when you're doing an interview and why it's so important to me and why I'm at Karat is that, interviewing changes people's lives. And so I think we as companies, owe it to folks to have a structured interview process in place, learning to set expectations correctly, making sure that, it's predictive, right? Make sure it's sensitive, right? Understanding, making sure it produces a distribution that allows you to make meaningful distinction between candidates rather than injecting the subjectivity that all of us have been, have experienced in our careers. And I think, the other pieces that folks don't usually kind of understand is that it needs to also be equitable, right? So that a couple of candidates with equal skill come in and they should expect equal results. And also the most importantly and near and dear to my heart as a female in STEM is that it's objective, right? So criteria is unambiguous and measurable. And there's not an opportunity for the interviewer not just to inject bias, against the candidate, but also inject their own biases. And so it really is a difficult process. And, frankly, it's hard because it's never been any of our jobs. I wasn't taught to, interview when I first started coming up. I wish I would. And I asked the same question for over 10 years that gave absolutely no signal about on-site job performance. So it's I think there's a lot of folks that would agree that it's difficult, but I think it's also difficult to find resources on the right path. Does that make sense?
So I know Kim has got a bunch of questions, but
yes,
before she
Kim.
goes into, because she helps a lot of our own engineers prepare for how to deal with interviews and such. I personally don't like being quote unquote tested. It chokes me up, and I consider myself a fairly intelligent individual. But when it comes to testing, it's like a necessary evil. It trips me up, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people feel the same way. Is there an opportunity to shift it from being this must-do thing to gamifying it and actually turning it into something that's fun? Has anybody thought about doing that? Maybe making it fun, where it's not like, oh, I got to do this thing now. It's a test. What are your thoughts around that?
I think interviewing could be fun for sure, but I think we need to make sure that it's fun, but also gives objective results, right? So, part of our job is to hire interview engineers, folks that this is their position. And we only actually hire between 1% and 2% of people that want to be interview engineers, because we do expect them to have interpersonal skills. We do expect them to have EQ. We do expect them to be just as technical as the rest, but to know how to set expectations. And we do a lot of training around that. So I think you can make it fun, but I think more importantly, we can help candidates showcase themselves by following certain rules, including setting clear and consistent expectations. So it's no fun if I go into an interview and they say, hey, I need you to build a diagram and recreate tiny URL. Am I building a diagram out of building the system? Am I expected to build in, test cases? Are you expecting me to talk you through it, right? So I think it's really uncomfortable for folks because most of the time, the way that people approach interviewing, especially in technology, is not necessarily consistent or clear.
Well, I know for a fact that we have a practice. One of our practice when we interview software engineers and give them quote unquote a test or a mini hackathon is to see if they ask questions. Yeah. Because if you're just going to be a lone wolf going out and doing your thing, but not engaging as a team, that's not necessarily going to work in an environment where we're trying to create intimacy with our clients. So how do you, help perhaps some of the more introverted mindset? There's quite a few in the engineering space. Just give me something to work with. I don't want to deal with people. That's kind of a mindset sometimes. How do you help them break out of that and not be afraid to ask the questions? Okay, give me some specificity around what you want me to do with this. How do you get interviewers to encourage that, or perhaps up front to kind of remove that barrier? What's been working for you guys?
Yeah, Kim, it sounded like you wanted to jump in, and I can answer. Yeah.
Well, this is not my expertise, but I think it goes back to, in my immediate opinion, is what you talked about at the very beginning and part of your tagline, which it's deemed as nobody's job. And I think it goes to whose job is it, and who are the people that are doing the interviewing, and how they can properly set the stage, which I think is what Tulio is kind of getting at, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. It's really all about that bidirectional accountability, right? Yeah, absolutely. We should, of course, it's asking questions is something that you expect, but just make sure that you make it clear. Hey, here's the exercise, right? These are what my expectations are. Please feel free to ask me questions. We even for all of our interviews, what we've learned for people that are of underrepresented communities, or people that are a bit introverted or have anxiety in the process, we also introduce the concept of a no question asked redo, where they have different people that are interviewing them again. And at least at this point, they understand if this company has adopted consistent processes, then they know what to expect. They come in, they know what the format is, they'll have an introduction, they know that there'll be some sort of communication around a project, which is, by the way, best practice is start with a 5-minute introduction, warm up a little bit, speak to the person about who they are, then maybe talk to them about a project that they've worked on, right? And say, okay, tell me about something you're excited about. Tell me about a project. And then go into your coding questions or system design questions. That makes sense?
I think it totally does. And I had something to say, and now my mind completely went blank. So I think sometimes we tend to counsel people this way. Like, what would you say the approach is? I think sometimes people have this idea of when I'm interviewing, it needs to be tricky. It needs to be tough. Like, I need to see how well this person can think, and are they problem solvers? Would you be more in line with that approach, or more in line with a team approach? Like, I'm here to help you. Like, let's talk about this. Show me what you would do if you were actually my teammate, if we're actually working together. Like, is it this university professor, you're taking an exam and you're all on your own, versus, let's pair program kind of approach?
Yeah, so we have actually a bunch of data around this. And so it turns out well over 40% of industry folks who end up ultimately getting hired actually needed some sort of feedback mechanism or, minimal handholding in the process, even at the top tech companies in the world, which is who we work with. And so I would say that if you go into an interview and you want to trick up the candidate, you're not necessarily enabling them to showcase their best selves. And I would question, what signal are you getting? I think the most important piece is to take a step back, really define the competencies that will give you and the questions that will give you the most signal of on-site success. So if part of your process is throwing an engineer in a room with the CTO of Google and saying, hey, write on a board and build me some code, then by all means, go ahead. But if your process is more setting expectations, working with the team, having clear objectives, having clear measurement of your objectives, then you should probably employ the same things in your interview process.
Excuse me, we have a question from the audience for Shannon. Yeah, and the question is this: how does Karat adjust to your clients' needs? Or in other words, if you have many clients with different expectations, how do you make sure that you're accomplishing their expectations, that you're meeting their expectations?
I love that question. So that's exactly what my team does. And it's an iterative process, actually. So there's two ways in which we at Karat, and we also do a lot of training around the world with another team on this, in which we kind of adjust to what we call companies' hiring bars to get the most signal and to optimize their hiring funnel. The first way that we do that is with content. Now, we look at the job description. We take a look at any questions that have been asked previously on site to see, which one of those questions gave the most signal. And then we will adjust and use our own content based on that feedback that we've seen. We've done over 75,000 interviews now. And so we actually will make sure that the content in the 1 hour interview process is aligned with what would give the most signal of success on site. The second way we do that is with structured rubric. Throughout the interview process, what we've learned over time, we ended up with over 70 different inputs that the interview engineer fills out throughout the process. So we actually have structured rubrics around each of the competencies, communication skills all the way to coding. And it's standard, and so we fill that out. And then the third thing that we do is as you would expect, we're developers. We make data-driven decisions. And so we monitor that data over time. So if we have a candidate that comes through, and in the first part of the engagement, they do the interview, and the folks who are the hiring managers say, you know what, I'm not sure that question gave us much signal, but this question did, then we can adjust and change out content. Now, over time, as we look at the ultimate outcome, what we do is we take a look at all the data and say, okay, you thought that communication was really important, so we weighted that extra heavy, but we noticed you've hired quite a few candidates that didn't necessarily have as high of a score, I hate using score, but a score in communication. So why don't we drop that down so that you're not having kind of false negatives in your process and that the candidates that you truly need come through. So it's all about making data-driven decisions about your structured rubrics.
So, excuse me, 750,000 interviews. That's now a small number.
75,000. Sorry.
Well, I'm sorry. Maybe I heard wrong.
Sorry, it's my bad.
I'm sure it was me. But going 75,000, 750,000, still large numbers.
Right.
So all of this data that you're referring to, is this all human oriented with your engineers and with your technical interviewers, or do you rely on any type of application and machine learning?
No, that's a great. So if we did all of the kind of ultimate recommendation calculations by hand, it would take a long time. So yeah, we absolutely have technology in place in order to take the structured rubric data and also the kind of feedback that we get from our clients directly, and it will build ultimately like a recommendation out of that. We have 4 levels of recommendation that come out of Karat, and all of that. Yes, absolutely. We do have data and AI and machine learning and all sorts of different algorithms over time. But ultimately, the conversations with the clients are just as important in giving signal as some sort of engine out there. And then, we all know that. Yeah.
Yeah. I know there's another audience question, but I want to just quickly chime in with one more before we go to that audience question. And that is, how does an organization know when it's time to bring you guys in, right? What are the sort of telltale signs, the red flags? Sometimes there's egos involved, right? At CTO's like, I got this. I've been doing this for 20 years. When does it what are the telltale signs where perhaps you should have a conversation with these guys? When does that happen?
Yeah, well, I have to tell you, on top of the 75,000 interviews we've done, we've also given back over 1 million hours of development time to companies. So how does a company know when to come to us? Usually people come to us with one of 2 problems. One, they're having a capacity problem. It's really tough. They're ending up with, interviewer fatigue, where the same person gets tapped on the shoulder because this other guy, he's probably not as good at giving a signal. So, one is a capacity problem, or they're bursting their hiring. Even if you're hiring 50 or 30 engineers, and especially if you don't have a huge group of folks who are trained on interviewing, because again, that's not their job, they come to us and we handle the capacity problem. But the other problem that we see more often than not is a consistency problem. CTOs will come and say, sometimes we get great folks in here, sometimes we don't, or hey, Shannon and team, we'd really like to make sure that we're a more diverse culture, but we have no way of sensing whether or not subjectivity is coming into the mix, like this kind of tribe mentality and so on, and they need some data around the process. And then I guess the last would be, companies that know that they want to raise their hiring bar. They know that they kind of want to, build a little bit more of an A team, I guess, as they would put it, but essentially just consistently raising a hiring bar, but they don't have the data to do that because frankly, historically, you don't have that data, right? It's a black box. You have an interviewer, you have a candidate, they go into a room, you close the door, you pray and you hope that something good comes out of it, but you don't necessarily know what happens. And so those are really the 3 times that folks come to us.
So you offer consultation services in addition to actually going through the interviews yourselves?
Yeah. So what we do, part of our platform is really to first you have an assigned team that works with you, talks about your KPIs, your hiring goals, takes a look at your data. We also have industry data at this point, so we try and drive some transformation within your organization by giving you some kind of broader perspective on the interview process. But we also know that ultimately folks are going to come on site for interviews, and if you want to employ the consistency that you're getting out of Karat, it's really important for us to provide you with resources to come on site and train your development team on how to be consistent and on some of the processes that we talked about so far on this. And so, yeah, it is part of our core engagement with our clients is that we offer our teams to go and do training all over the world. Yeah.
I think there was another question.
Yeah, there's another question from the audience.
Sure.
And the question is, how do your clients know you're going to deliver a good professional, or is there some kind of guarantee for that? How does that work?
Oh yeah, we provide you with the video for every single interview. This is also how we build consistency in the process. Yeah, absolutely.
So there's transparency. It's not like you said, a black box. You can
100%. 100%.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
we also use it. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm curious to learn who your ideal client is. Are they mostly software company or services companies who hire a lot of engineers? What's the mix like?
It runs the gamut. I mean, we have some services companies. It's essentially people that are, I think the ideal client profile would be folks that are hiring quite a few engineers. They don't have the capacity. These are anywhere from high-tech companies to financial institutions, to services companies. I think, we have all sorts of engagements. I don't have an NASCAR slide for you, but yeah, we definitely go across all quite a few different types. But it's not just high-tech. I mean, everybody wants to understand what their hiring bar is. Every company is a software company today. So, but I would say ideally companies that are bursting in their hiring process, or they have, 250, 300 plus engineers. That being said, we also have a part of the business that does work with startups who are trying to hire, those folks that are trying to get through their first hire, and they want to use the industry hiring bar that we've, again, gleaned from those interviews. And so, but I say for all the services and kind of the teams that we support, that's probably the ideal client profile.
Shannon, I have a question, and my question is more like on the company culture side, so that it has that spin. There are a lot of companies out there, especially bigger companies or large companies, large organizations, that are sort of prone to referring to their engineering teams or the engineers as resources. And on the other hand, you have engineers who might be a little bit reluctant to be referred to as such. So because there are controversies on what term to use and why to use it and when not to. And I personally feel more inclined towards just calling them people or not resources. So it's kind of there are various opinions. I would be interested in asking you what your personal opinion is about this term, the using resources to refer to engineers. Do you see any conflict in use, or what is your personal take on this?
Yeah, I'll take this a couple of ways. First, humans are humans. We're human beings, and we employ human beings, and engineers are human beings. I understand the desire to kind of box folks into a resources bucket when you're working on the operations side, for example. And I think it's really important for engineering leaders to be able to communicate with operational leaders within a company, because part of your job is to be able to equate what your team is working on or your priorities with business value. You have to tie the two together, or else you're failing your team and you won't be able to advocate for the resources that they need. Resources being software, product, money, not humans, right? Mm-hmm. But again, I think you have to be comfortable with both. But if you ask me from a personal perspective, speaking about engineers as resources outside of the context of your OpEx, I find it is our job as managers and folks in management to hire people smarter than us and give them what they need to do their job and trust them. But we also, as managers, need to realize that these people in your team, you're in charge of their livelihoods. These are human beings. You're in charge of whether their family eats or not, or the lifestyle that they have. So if you don't feel that very deeply, then you shouldn't manage people. I don't care about your career. No offense to anybody. What I care about is the future and the growth of the people that are working for you. And I think calling them resources degrades that kind of feeling, that sentiment about the people that you're managing.
Yeah, we agree with that. Completely 100% agree with that. In fact, before joining Nearsoft, I had mostly been in a corporate, quote unquote, corporate environment, larger companies, where it was very easy to refer to people as resources, assets, human capital. But when you really think about it, it is degrading. It's condescending. Mm-hmm. We're not machines. We're not cogs. We're people. And it's disrespectful. And I think we'd like to see that change. Certainly as an organization, we don't refer to our folks as resources. It's frowned upon.
I agree. And, technology, we've come a long way. Look, we're here. There's 2 females here talking about technology. It's exciting. But we have a long way to go. And if you don't recognize that there's room for improvement, then the evolution doesn't happen. And I think, absolutely looking at developers as humans first is extremely important. And at Karat, by the way, that's part of the reason I'm at Karat, is it's the safest place and it's the place that aligns with my values, the closest that I've ever been in my entire career. We would never, ever refer to candidates or interview engineers or our engineers as resources. We try and employ as much as we can in order for folks to be recognized for who they are, anywhere from people being able to choose their pronoun or choose not to share, and I think all of those things come into play because ultimately we actually care. Right. And so I'm with you. I love this audience. Thank you.
Well, congratulations. I think that caring company culture goes a long way. And I think it's really contagious. And that's very encouraging. A while back, we actually interviewed here on Dojo Live another person, and he was mentioning that it's important for companies to keep in mind that the interviewing process is an experience for the candidate as well, right? Obviously we need to interview well because we want to try to get the best person, the best fit for the company, but also to take in those individuals into consideration, the process and the time and just how hard interviewing can be. So going back to whose job it is to interview and those engineers in companies who are stepping up, who are helping with these technical interviews, what advice would you have for them, particularly as individuals, to encourage them to raise their hands, and when they have raised their hands, how to do that role as best as possible?
Yeah, I think that the first and foremost, give interviewing at your company an owner and provide them with the resources that are necessary in order for them to own that. And so by assigning an engineer, optimize each part of the interview, you're actually creating accountability and consistency. And in order for that to work, you need to find a way to audit interviews. Everybody gets better with practice and feedback. Even if you can't record, have like a structured form that they're filling out, and make sure that you have an ATS system or some sort of data system in place to see how they've been performing and on, predictability over time. Right. But I think, the biggest resource is just realize that as folks are growing and they want to be a part of this, they need the time to do that. Often we say, hey, by the way, I want you to work 40 hours a week. I want you to get all your work done. Oh, and can you own interviewing? I personally, I give my team members 10% of their week to learn a new skill that's going to help them. Right. And so if you want somebody to own interviews, then give them, 4 hours a week or 2 hours a week, whatever you can afford. I get not everybody can do that, but, give them a couple hours a week and the access to resource in order to learn how to do that consistently, and then celebrate, all of the different milestones. Maybe they have OKRs around the interview program and their celebration. One thing I find in engineering that I've found over, this is no different with interviewing and the like, is that often we just get in this place where we're like, go, build, and we don't stop. We don't have milestones. We don't have things where people feel like, oh my gosh, I'm making some progress. I'm actually doing something amazing, right? We need to make sure, even with, just interviewing as part of their job, make sure they have milestones and goals and that they see the broader impact of the work that they're doing. Engineers are human, right? We want to see the impact of our work. And I guess the last is just give them, like I said, give them the tools that they need to, for data collection and processing data from the beginning. Engineers usually can do that, but ATS systems and these types of things, they have very specific metrics that would be helpful for them to build that kind of a process.
Are there any particular resources, non-human resources, that you would refer to, like any particular training websites, books, literature, studies, that those people who are interested in creating, gathering those resources and creating a better structure, where could they go?
Gosh, yeah. I mean, I hate that, plugging. We do have blog posts and releases because this is our business, and there's a ton of resources on our blog. There's always, I'm thinking there is a resource online. If you look on YouTube, it's also a colleague of mine that does training all over the world. They have their own YouTube channel, and they have a partner that's one of our interview engineers, and they get on and they start to talk about exactly how to engineer the interview, what those concepts look like, and they take questions. I'm happy to share more after if you
Sure.
like.
Yeah. That'd be great.
You on the spot there.
No.
And we can certainly share
Well,
those resources in the.
We'll
the
collect
page.
some of that. We'll collect some of that content and definitely share it on the recap show on Monday as well. Shannon, we're up on time. It's been great to have you. What I've heard is very clearly is, you know, a lot of companies will tap the shoulder of their engineers to do the secondary job of interviewing, and it should really be a practice where someone actually has that role. That is dedicated to it, that is proficient at it, and it doesn't become a moonlight second job for people who already have a full-time job coding or building products. So great to have you. We'll make sure we share that content on the landing page here. Thanks for joining us today. Please stay with us as we wrap up. And join us on Monday for the recap show at 1 p.m. Pacific. We will recap this week's 2 shows and highlight the key things we've learned and make sure we share whatever resources we've learned to share in those recaps as well. Carlos, what do we got coming up next week besides the recap?
Yeah, Tulio, we're going to keep a couple of folks awake either very early in the morning or very late at night because our guests are based in Australia and in India. On Tuesday, we're going to be speaking with Danny May, the CEO of Lingmo, an automated transcription and translation company based out of Sydney. And we're going to be speaking about delivering smarter translation. And on Thursday, we'll be speaking with Manoj Agarwal, the co-founder of Shosho, that I hope I pronounced it correctly, Shosho XOXO Day. And this is basically a journey to building a full stack motivation and engagement technology company. That's for next week, Tuesday and Wednesday. There's no show scheduled yet for Wednesday. I'm sorry, Tuesday and Thursday. There's no show for Wednesday yet, but it's all right here on Dojo Live. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Please stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.